No audio. This is what I love about live streaming is things like this tend to happen all the time. Thank you to the guys in the chat for letting me know that there's no audio. I will redo a short version of my introduction where I just said hi to everyone. I said hi because I've not done a stream for a while. As you can tell, based on the fact that we started with no audio, so it can only be better now, right? Um, and I was also talking about the fact that I am a senior trainer at Maxon. So my name's Elly, for those of you who don't know who I am. Hi, I do a lot of live streams, I do a lot of content, do a lot of training for Maxon. And 2 weeks ago, we released a new version of Redshift that came with a couple of cool new features. And then even before that, what we try and do is almost every single month we release a update, right? An update to Redshift and to a lot of our other products. And so I decided that because there's been a bunch of cool new features, that I would just jump on today and talk you through some of them. So hello to everyone who's joining us live. Hi to everyone in the chat. If you are here live, thank you so much. Please use that chat section to have a conversation with each other, have a conversation with me. If you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them. But yeah, we've got a bit of time. The plan is maybe kind of like 45, 50 minutes, which is my famous last words normally, and then we love to overrun. But let's get into it. Let's get into it. Also, if there's more problems like the audio, please let me know. And also, I'm going to apologize now because it's been a little bit since I've done a stream, right? So we're easing our way back in. Cool. So let me just. So we said the mic's a bit low, so I'll pull it a bit closer and let me go over here. So hopefully this is all good for you all. So the plan is we're going to go through maybe kind of like 4 or 5 like major features. So the first of which is hex tiling, which actually came out in the previous release. So I want to talk about hex tiling, a little bit about that UV context projection node, which if you're not using it, you really should be using it. It's amazing. We're also going to talk about texture displacement, and in particular, one of the updates is that you can now do displacement blending and material stacking for that. I do a lot of training, and still a lot of people don't really know about texture displacement, so I really want to kind of talk about that. We've got some updates to clouds. So again, we updated the like clouds as like a new feature, I think end of last year, and now we've got some updates. We've got some different sort of altitude clouds. We also have a new procedural scratches shader, which is really cool. And then we've got some updates to Redshift Live. So we're going to play around with a bunch of those cool new features. Like I said, if you have any questions, anything, just want to say hi in the chat. Hi to everyone in the chat. Hi to everyone watching the recording as well. So yeah, don't worry. We're on 3 YouTube channels today. We're on Maxon Training Team and Redshift. And yes, this is recorded and we are going to be hosting this on YouTube. So don't you worry about that. So some people are saying my audio is pretty low. I'll be honest, I think it's as high as it can go for me. And my microphone is actually pretty close. So hopefully you can turn your volume up. Hopefully that helps. I'll do my best to talk a little bit louder than I normally do. Cool, right, so let's get into it. We'll talk about hex tiling first. Like I said, this isn't a new feature, but it's something that came out in the, not the last release, but the release before that. And I'm going to explain it first of all, just with a simple UV tile, right? So let's go media, here we go, right. Let's grab a material. And I'm going to drop this in here. So basically what hex tiling is you know when you have textures and you tile them and you end up getting that really kind of uniform pattern and we see the repetition in our tiling and in our texturing and we all hate it, this is going to solve that for you. I'm going to show you first of all using this test grid just because it's going to allow me to really explain the different... Oh, here we go. Great start. We have a crash immediately. This is the best. Maybe we won't talk about this. This is a really good start so far. So we've had a crash and we've had no audio, but it's fine. These things happen. This is the joys of being live. We'll try it again just to see. because you know, like, let's do these things twice. UV tile. Let's go again. Under media. Oh, it was UV test, wasn't it? UV test. Right. This is not going to be a good sign if we're having these crashes. Go into there. All fine. Good start. Onto there. Another good start. Here we go. This is going to be the test. The render view. There we go. Right. This is going to be a fun 45 minutes for everyone watching me hopefully not crash the software. But hey, you all know me for hopefully long enough now to know that this stuff is you know the way it is when we live stream. Cool. So talking about hex tiling, so we know what we can do is we can tile our textures, right? We can do this in loads of different places. We can do it in the material itself, where we can just come in and we can tile. We can see we get that repetition. We can also do it within our texture itself. So within my texture here, we can then come in and we can tile this way. So this is a repeated problem that people have when they use texture maps, especially when they want to tile large scale texture maps. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, an asphalt road, or maybe like a forest ground, or like a landscape ground, right? If we have these really large scale geometries and meshes, we tend to have to tile quite a lot of our textures. And then we end up seeing this repetition, right? And so this is where the hex tiling is going to come into play. So it's found within the UV context projection node. This is a really, really powerful node. It's new in the scheme of things. I think it was kind of, I'm going to test myself. It might have been earlier this year, or it might have been late last year. And it allows us to basically control different projection types for individual textures and entire materials. And so what we can do is we can just literally hover that over and it's going to connect this for us, right? It's really nice, really clever. All it's doing is at the bottom of this texture node, we now have this UV context input. So we can do some different things here. We can change the projection types if we want to. What I might do is actually just drop that back to a 1x1 tile. And so tiling, if I set this to 2, so now I'm doing this tiling through my context projection. I'm not doing it through the texture node itself. So we can see we have this tiling, this repetitive pattern. And again, for anyone who's joined a little bit later, I'm deliberately using this UV test tile just so I can show you exactly what's happening here. So in here, we have this repetition, and the semi-new feature is under this drop down here, we now have the tiling mode as hex. So now I set this to hex, and we can now see we get this kind of crazy jumbled up pattern here. And what it's doing is it's using hexagons with a little bit of noise and blending to avoid any repetitive patterns as I'm tiling my texture up. So we can still, like we said, we can still then come in and tile our texture. So if I want to tile this more, I can do, or I can tile it less. I can set that back to just one tile and it's still then going to give me that kind of hex pattern. We can continue to, we can offset and we can rotate, right? We still have those options, but the interesting ones are kind of these values here, which are controlling the blend and the mix between this hex tiling. So if I remove my tile blend, let me get a little bit closer in here. So we can see these hexagons now really visually, right? Again, because we're using this kind of this UV tile. So you wouldn't really use this with geometric materials or textures or patterns because it's going to mess it up kind of like this. It's more for organics and stuff like that, large scale textures that you might want to tile. So we have this tile blend. So this is going to be the blend in between here, how much that is going to then basically blend and mix between. So you can see as I pull that up, the change that gets. We then have our blend curve. Think of this as our fall off. So again, kind of how much we're then going to allow that blend to then overlap with the tiles around it. If I just move that all the way down, and we have our blend noise. So we can see as I sort of play around with this, you know what, let's go back to 1 just so we can all see it a bit nicer. We can see the noise around my hex tiles, and then my noise scale. Again, if I just sort of like pull down, those of you who have, you know, avid Cinema 4D users will know about noise and noise scale and those kind of like patterns that can come with that. So the smaller the scale, the smaller that noise pattern is going to be. The higher the scale, the higher that noise pattern is going to be between my materials. Okay, so what this means is if we look at this in the context that we actually want to use it in, not in this, but perhaps we have like a plane or we have a ground or a landscape that we want to create a better thing for. What we can do is I'll do it on just like a straight plane for now, just so we can see it. And I'm going to create just a new material, and then in here, let me just pull this out. We can go ground. So we can do this on our texture maps. We could build this up ourselves if we want to, or we can do it on full materials. So I'm going to go into materials, and I know we have some pretty cool ground materials inside of our asset library. So something like this. I'm just going to double click that and drag and drop that onto here. Let's make this a bit bigger. So with this material, I'm actually going to change this a little bit because it's already using a triplanar setup using the legacy triplanar method. And what we're going to do is we're just going to plug that into there, plug that directly into there, plug that directly, what was this one? Roughness. Plug that into my bump and plug that into my displacement. Then I should be able to delete all my triplanars. And that. Cool. So we have a setup as if we'd just built this from scratch with textures, right? Let me just make this a bit more neat and tidy. Cool. So if I just solo the albedo for now, so this is going to be our base color. So this would be the idea here. We have this plane. Maybe we can make it something like 4,000 by 4,000. And if I had my little person, let's get my little figure, my little dude down here. If my plane was, let's say, 4,000 by 4,000, right, pretty big, and my person or my character or my object here is in the middle, we can all be in agreement that this texture size is incorrect, right? So what we'd need to do to make it look better is we would need to tile it. So the kind of original method would be to come into here. I always have to cough when I'm streaming because I end up talking too much. So I can tile this 8 by 8, okay? And we can probably agree that maybe size-wise it's starting to look fine. But if we zoom out, we can now see we're getting that repetition, right? We can see that tiling taking place. And so this is where the hex tiling is really going to be a lifesaver for us. Let's do that same method. We'll take that UV context projection, and I'll plug it straight in to the albedo here. And I'm just going to change this back to 1 by 1. Change this to hex. And I'm going to change this to 8. So now we can see we're no longer getting that repetition because of that hex method in here. So this is a really, really cool addition that's come in, especially when it comes to tiling textures. I know, like, it drives us all crazy when we tile a texture and we can see that repetition, right? It's not ideal. So what we could also do is, so at the moment, this is only really connecting to this texture, right? But what we can do is a few different methods to have this happen universally to the entire material. We can plug it directly into the output. So we can see here, plug it directly into the output, and it's going to then affect all of the nodes, the textures that are connected to that output node. What we can also do is we could come into the standard material, and under advanced, we should actually have, here we go, this UV context. If I just like command click that, we could plug it into just the standard material. And you're probably thinking, why would we perhaps do this method and not just plug it straight into the output? Well, on this particular material, yes, we could plug it straight into the output. But let's say you have multiple different displacements going on. You might want your UV context projection to be controlling all of these textures. And then, so if we have like displacement, and we have a displacement blender, and we have another displacement, right? Let's say this is our hypothetical setup. We have one texture in here, one texture in here, and we're mixing between them here. We might then say, well, on this one, which could be this original displacement, we need the UV context projection, right? We need that one on that one, but we don't want it on this one. We don't want this to be tiling because it's already fine. This is where this method, and we'd plug that, and we'd plug that, and then we'd go like that, right? This is a way, or this is perhaps why we would use this method, so we can have absolute control by not going to the output and instead going onto the individual nodes or the individual material setups themselves, right? So, very cool, very fun. One other quick thing I do want to talk about on here, which might be helpful, is in a MoGraph setup. So let's just pull these out. In a MoGraph setup, let's drop that on the cloner. And then let's come into here. And then what we can do is we can, you know what, actually, I'm going to save this. I'm going to save this for the scratches shader, because then I can show you this setup and then I can show you the scratches setup with it. So we're going to save this. We're going to pause this. I'm going to save it. Let me just double check there's no questions, because I'm here solo today, if it's not abundantly obvious by the issues that have happened. Do you think legacy materials will be updated? Let's have a look at this one. With the latest triplanar method, maybe when 2026 been installed on most custom machines. So yeah, that's referring to the material that we just loaded that had the original triplanar node in. I cannot speak for the team. I do not know if this is going to be updated. It would be amazing if so, and what I can do is I can feed this back. We have an entire team that are designated to what we call capsules. They are our assets, our materials, everything that you can see in our wonderful asset library. We have an entire team that manage that, they look after it, and they develop that. So I can feed this back and see if it is something that it can be looked at, because yeah, like you said, this method is great, and a lot of these assets were created before UV context came out. Cool, thank you for the question. Right, so that was hex tiling. You know, if you have any questions on that, let me know. If you have any questions on the UV context projection as well, also let me know. Right, let's have a little look at texture displacement. So what I'm going to do is, let me just get rid of these. I like building things from scratch. I know it isn't the most like beautiful thing to see, but I like going from start to finish with steps when I show new features. So let's do something like this. Let's make this quite big to, let's go 4,000. I'm enjoying this little 4,000 by 4,000 for some reason. 4,000 by 4,000. And let's maybe make this a bit bigger. So texture displacement is something that got introduced quite a while ago, and it works alongside the original displacement method, but it actually can be faster, especially when it comes to simplified meshes. So actually, let me show you first of all on a plane. So I want to show you first of all texture displacement, and like I said, it's a feature that came out a while ago. We have got a new update, and I'm going to show the update as well, which is the fact that we can now blend texture displacement, which is very cool. But I do a lot of training, and so a lot of people are unaware that this is possible now, this kind of like displacement. So what we're going to do is on my plane, we'll leave it. We can leave it 400 by 400, and I'm going to set the segments to 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let's just take that ground material that we liked. So which one was it? Let's take one of these. This one's quite cool. So we're going to create a whole new material. Like I said, I like to build stuff from scratch so we can really see how it's done. Drag that in there. And then I'm just going to put that on my plane. So we can set up displacement really easily. We can just grab the texture that we want, grab the displacement node, and we can just connect these things together. And we can see we already have displacement, right? What this is auto displacement. So it's not necessarily correct, but we're getting a displacement visual, right? What we can do is let's throw in a dome light and let's throw in a HDR just so we can see some things a bit better. Let's just do this one, nice and simple. Drag and drop that in there. There we go. Close that down. Cool. So just going to have a little process of it. Just going to think about it. I have the beach ball. It's fine. There we go. There we go. Cool. So we can see we have this displacement, right? One of my tips for you, if you ever want to check your displacement, because visually we would all say, yeah, this looks fine. This looks how we want it to look, but it's actually not doing what it should be doing. And if we go to clay mode, so this option here, if I just select that, and I can go between normal and clay mode, we can see no displacement, right? And that's because by default, globally, what we have in here is under globals, a global displacement method, which is vertex displacement. Vertex displacement is the original method, and this requires high enough amounts of geometry subdivision to show our displacement, right? And I can show you that at the moment we have segments of 1 by 1. Let's set this back to 100 by 100. Still can't really see anything. Oh, it's because I put 10. 100 by 100. Oh, okay, cool. Hopefully everyone can see this. I know it's not the best when it's like 1080p through YouTube. Also something that we are working on, don't you worry. We're kind of getting something here. Let's maybe just throw in like a subdivision, and okay, right, getting a little bit closer. So the more we're subdividing our geometry, the closer we're getting to that final accurate displaced result. That is vertex displacement. As we can imagine, we don't always want to subdivide our model. What we can also do is we can control the subdivisions through the Redshift tag. So if I right click on my plane, go to the Redshift tag, we can go to geometry, I can override it. This is now going to allow me to override the displacement locally on that object. So it's going to take the settings from here. Because of my tag, it's not going to take the settings from my render settings in my globals that we just looked at. So let's turn that on. Tessellation is allowing us to subdivide, so we can then subdivide, and you can see how we're now subdividing that geometry again to then try and bring out some of that detail. Like we said, if we're having to do this to a high degree, it can have a negative impact on not only the performance of our scene, but the performance of our render. introducing texture displacement. Right, I am going to pull this out of my subdivision surface, even though it was off, just to really show you. I'm going to come into here. I'm going to change this drop down. I'm going to override it now to texture displacement. And ooh, all of a sudden, we're still in clay mode. All of a sudden, we're getting a result that actually looks pretty similar to what it should be looking like, right? And even more interesting, if I go into my plane and I go into my segments, I can set these to 1. I mean, it's going to smooth my plane out. That's fine. We can smooth subdivisions. There we go. Get rid of that. And we're still getting the result that we should be getting. And that's because it's doing it based off of the texture that's within my material. And then the texture resolution is the way I can now improve the look of my displacement. So we have this bake resolution, and we can only go as high as the texture allows. So for example, I think this is a 4K texture. I'm pretty sure most of them are in the asset library. If I went to 8K, it's just going to revert back to 4K because it's not an 8K texture, right? It's not magic. So I'm going to go 4K. And we can now see, if I go a little bit closer, we now have a lot more of these details coming out in here, and I can still increase my scale if I want to, right? So I can come in, I can increase my scale. So this is a 1x1 segment plane, right? So a very great way of working. It's better on simplified geometry. So that's the one sort of like caveat behind this is more simple geometry. In this case, I'm using a plane. If I was using a landscape, this is the way that we would do that. So now for the update that came in, because those of you who use Redshift or those of you who kind of follow our team will go, hey, we already knew about this. That previous 5 minutes was for all the people who weren't aware that we have texture displacement and how cool it really is. But the update is we previously weren't able to do any kind of displacement blending or material stacking. And so let's just cut this back down to 2, just for the sakes of it. So we weren't able to mix materials or blend materials or stack them or blend displacements, right? Yeah, we had to use vertex displacement. Whereas now we're actually able to. So let me show you how we can combine these together. And I'll do it with, let's just do it with a noise, right? Just to make life easy. So I'm going to take a Maxon noise. I'm going to come out of my clay mode just so I can get a preview of my displacement, because we can't preview our textures in clay mode. So if you ever, I've done this before, by the way, I've done this on a live stream, on a training session. I forgot I had clay mode on and didn't know why I couldn't see it. So my mistakes become your education, I guess. So yeah, make sure you're in your normal view if you want to view your textures. Let's just take one of these. Maybe we can make it a little bit bigger, perhaps. Definitely not that. Here we go. And then we could maybe just increase the contrast just a touch. Right, so let's say we would like this displacement and this displacement, both using texture displacement on my material, on my object. So the steps behind this, and these are the steps for any kind of displacement blending. So if you ever would like to blend between different amounts of displacement, this is how you can do it. So I'm seeing a couple of sentences about the audio. You might be watching the beginning of the stream where, yes, my audio wasn't working. So it should kick in after a couple of minutes. If you are at this point now, hello, this current period, and the audio is not working, let me know. I think it should be fine though, because I think other people said it's okay now. Cool, so back into displacement blending. We've got that connected there. We're gonna have that connected there. And then we're going to just connect in my displacement blender. We have my inputs for my base layer 0, 1, and 2. So we can technically blend up to 4 different amounts of displacement here. So we're gonna plug that in there, and I'm gonna plug that in there. In my displacement blender, you know what, let's go back to clay mode again, because I really like to just show displacement just with the clay mode. We have this blend weight, where at the moment we have a blend weight of 0 on layer 0. So we actually have 0 weight or involvement of that displacement. If I pull this up to 1, this gets overtaken by this. So base layer gets overtaken by layer 0. But what we can do is we can do additive mode, and this is now going to combine and add those displacements on each time. You can also use a mask. So if you want one area to have one displacement and one area to have another displacement, you can do that. I'll show you how we can do that. What shall I use? Let's just use a ramp just to make life easier. Take a ramp, which is a gradient. Again, come out of there. So we then have like black to white. So what we could do is we could have our blend weight going black to white. And so then if I maybe make these a little bit more defined, what am I trying to do? This one, a little bit more defined. So maybe we can pull that in and pull that in. Maybe a bit more, like that. So now we're going from one displacement to another displacement, right? So this is the update that came in 2 weeks ago. We can now do texture displacement. What we can also do is if we have multiple materials, so let's say this one. I have seen there are some questions in the chat, don't worry, we will get to those as well. So if we have this material and then we have this material, I'm just going to duplicate it, you know. So this is going to be map 2, this is going to be map 1, and so on map 2 we're going to have this displacement. So map 1, map 2. If we do, so what we can do is we can stack multiple materials on, and then we can then do the add material option. So it's going to then layer them up on top of one another. That is also possible. This is most commonly used when people add, they have like polygon selections and they add different materials to different sections. This can now work. Also good audio is now working. That is great. So yeah, we can now stack multiple materials. One thing I will say on stacking materials, there is a limitation. We have a limitation of, it's about 6 materials. What it is, it's 63 individual parameters. If we're getting kind of like technical about it, we can mix 63 individual parameters, which is base, specular, transmission, subsurface. So each material has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them. So if I add more and more of these, eventually it will hit its limit. One more maybe. There we go. It's hit its limit. So I had this question the other day on Instagram. Someone was saying they're stacking materials, they're blending materials, and then it ended up kind of not giving a result. A legal combination of shader nodes is because we have hit that max number of what we call closures, but it's the parameters. So yeah, just remember that when you are stacking and blending materials, there is a limit to that. That's why. Cool, so I'm going to do some quick questions just to see. So let's have a look at this one. I've done some experiments with jagged edges with height transition with texture displacement. Any best practices to soften the edges? To soften the edges of the texture displacement? Ooh, I think the best way for me to kind of solve that would be to get a simplified version of the project file to actually have a look at what it is you're trying to do. It's always hard sort of trying to get a full understanding. What I can do as well, let me see if I can share. Here we go, this should work. Cool. So I think it was was it GeoWolf? If you scan that, oh, actually anyone who's live, anyone who's watching the recording, you can scan that and you can actually ask us questions. So ping your question in there with a project file of what you're trying to do with those edges, with texture displacement, and I can have a look, and I can probably find a solution for you, or hopefully find a solution for you. Cool, that's the case for everyone else as well, who has any questions on slightly different things. If you want to look at a project file, yeah. Cool, so let's move on, because I know I promised that this was going to be 45 minutes, but that is looking less likely now. Keep your questions coming in as well. So let's have a quick look at the new clouds update. So let this load. Let's head into Redshift and let's kick this off. Okay, so we've got a really kind of like simple basic landscape scene going on here, and I've got a dome light. Here we go. I've got a dome light with just a clear sun and sky within it. I could also use the Redshift sun and sky rig, so whatever you prefer to use. I've just used a dome light, but we can use, like I said, the sun and sky rig. And so at the end of last year, we released a new clouds object, and that can be found in 2 different places. So the first place that we can find it, and this is important if you're working with a dome light and a HDRI, you come to objects and then you can add the Redshift clouds. So let me remove this one. Or if we're using the Redshift sun and sky rig, we can see in here under atmosphere, we have this create clouds option. And so my render's got a bit mad because we've just added that in there, but I'll delete that. So what we have here now is a slight change to the UI and a slight change to the kind of clouds that we have available. We have low altitude clouds and we have high altitude clouds. So the new introduction is actually high altitude clouds, but because we're here, I'm going to just do a little bit of a talk about both of these things. So let me just switch off high altitude clouds, and then I can switch off low altitude clouds. What they are is it's 2 levels of cloud detail for daytime scenes, nighttime scenes, atmospheric scenes, right? Low altitude clouds, if I switch those on, these are an initial layer of cloud based on procedural noise shaders. And then the high altitude clouds are actually based on a texture. And these are pretty much fully procedural, especially the low altitude clouds, fully procedural, and we can animate these as well. So we have a bunch of different settings. What I won't do is I won't go through every single one. I just want to talk to you about some of the main ones within here. We have things that can control the look of our clouds, which is this top section. Things like the density of our clouds, the coverage and the shape. So if I pull down the density, you can see how we are reducing sort of how thick or how dense and how dark therefore those clouds are, because it's going to be interacting with the light that you have within your scene. So it can go obviously more dense, and now we have obviously those thicker and those darker looking clouds. What we then have is the coverage. This is the amount of coverage in the sky that we have. We can obviously reduce that down, so we have less coverage, and then we can pull it up, and we can have, you know, the equivalent of normally the UK. Apart from lately, it's been extremely sunny, so I'm not going to complain too much. The shape is the approximation of different cloud types. So if we have a high shape value, we can see, if I remove that down a little bit, move that density down a little bit, we get these sort of more puffy clouds, sort of where they're more together and things like that. And then we have the opposite shape value, which therefore gets these, you know, more wispy and more separated clouds. We can control the altitude, which is, of course, the height of our clouds, and the thickness. So the altitude is the height that they are going to be in the scene, and thickness is going to be how tall those clouds are. So you can control the altitude and then the thickness. Kind of goes like that. I know I'm really small in this corner currently, but hopefully, hopefully we can still see that a little bit. We then have the scale of these. So this is controlling the scale of the primary noise that's controlling these clouds. So if let's get these a little bit more on here. Here we go. Let's have a bigger shape. So if I do a smaller scale, we have a smaller scale noise versus a larger scale noise to then represent the overall kind of shape of that cloud. And then we have our detail scale, which is controlling the secondary noise, which is generating the clouds. So again, if we go smaller, we can get these smaller detailed, wispier noise edges versus a higher sized noise to, again, all impact the shape and the look of our clouds. That entire top section is doing that. We then have the position of them, which we can control, you know, if we want to change the overall kind of offset on the X and the Z. We can also change the seed value. So again, everything inside of Cinema 4D that has a seed value will control the randomness of it. So we can kind of change that look really heavily just by adjusting that seed value. We then have controls to control the position, including the animation. So wind skew, what it's going to do is it's going to control the slanting of the clouds in the wind direction. So we can see with the wind direction here, so we can sort of control this wind direction. You can see how that will affect that wind skew. And then we have wind speed. So let's maybe increase this to something a little bit higher and then press play. So hopefully we can all see that the wind speed is, of course, the speed that they are going to move in the wind direction per frame, like seconds per frame, basically. And so we can have that higher, we can have that. So animating this is going to give you a more realistic result than animating just the offset. That's just going to take the clouds as they are and it's just going to offset them. Whereas when we actually animate the speed, it's going to change the look of the cloud. It's going to change the skew of the phase of the clouds as well. Cool. So a few more things within here. We have a horizon blend. So what I can do is I can increase that blend and you'll see how it's almost controlling the opacity of the clouds from the horizon. One of the questions we just had that I've just seen, why are the clouds so dark? So this is as a result of a few different things inside of the cloud object. For a start, it will be due to the density. So if you think about clouds in the real world, if we have really thick, really dense clouds, they tend to be darker, they tend to be more grey. So obviously less light is going to travel through them and they're going to be represented in a sort of this dark grey colour. If I reduce the density, it will, of course, then reduce the, quote, darkness of our clouds versus having a thicker density. But what we can also do is we can come in and we have some shading options down here. So shading is going to, or the scattering, sorry, is going to control the scattering of the light within the cloud, within the volume. So we can do some different things here. If I change and increase the scale of our scattering, it's going to allow us to increase the amount of light that is being scattered within the cloud. Again, this will then result in your clouds being lighter or having more light inside of them. So it gives the impression that they are, less grey. We have anisotropy, so we can do forward and backward scattering towards the light, away from the light. We can also control the direct lighting scale and the ambient lighting scale. This again might give you a result that you're hoping for. So if I sort of put that back down to a value of 1, and we increase that direct lighting scale, you can see how again that is going to give you perhaps the closer result that you are hoping for. I'm going to put that back down again. We also then have ambient lighting, and what this is going to do, the ambient lighting in our scene, which is being cast by at the moment our dome light and our HDRI, we're able to boost that scale of lighting within there. So hopefully with all of these different parameters, you will be able to not only control the shape and the animation, but the overall sort of look of the lighting that is being added or scattered within your scene. We also have some transparency options that we can control as well inside of here. So all of this stuff together, you might be able to find a result that you are happy with. Another question has come in. Is there a way to see the clouds in the viewport, not the Redshift viewport? No, this is a Redshift object and they are being generated within the render view. So we are unable to see them within here, unfortunately. Okay, so that was just going through the low altitude clouds, which came out, like I said, they came out earlier, sort of, I think the end of last year. And the update here is, if I just switch off low altitude clouds, just so we can really see it, is this secondary high altitude clouds option, which allows us to generate those higher altitude clouds that again adds to the realism of our scenes. So if I enable these, we can see that we're getting this secondary cloud method now. And what this is, like we said at the beginning, this is actually based on a texture map, which is why the settings are slightly more reduced, because the first lot of clouds are generated based on procedural noises. This is based on a texture. This also means you have to be careful when you go too high or too low with values, because you'll be able to see the repetition of that texture. But the idea here is we have these high altitude clouds that we can see. Again, we can sort of increase the density here, kind of, it still acts as density, but it's overall kind of like opacity, again, because it's a texture. So if I put that back down to 1, we can, I mean, I can only just see them. I'm sure through the stream they are not going to be very visible. Or I can set it as something like 50, and we can now see how visible these are. This is perhaps a little bit too intense, but it allows me to show you it really easily through the stream. So we could maybe set that back to something like 10. Again, we have altitude and scale, very similar to before. Control the altitude and how high these are going to be to a degree, and then the scale of our sort of texture, which results in the scale of our overall clouds here, as well as things like our position and our wind speed and direction, just like we just looked at there. So then the two of these things together, the idea would be to tweak your low altitude clouds and have these a little bit closer to what you would imagine. Also bear in mind that the render view, so this interactive render view here, is not a like for like to your final render. This is really important when it comes to things, especially that involve light scattering. So any volumes, any clouds, any refraction, any subsurface scattering, those of you who work inside of Redshift will know that this isn't the final look. So might also be worth doing a couple of test renders, maybe at a low quality. So do a low quality render here, because all the low is going to do is it's just going to make it noisy and grainy, but you're still going to see the clouds represented in the same way. So maybe do a couple of tests before sort of deciding that you're happy or not, because yeah, as you know, things can change when we do a final render. Cool. So let me see if there are any cloud questions. Hey to everyone who has joined. So hey Derek, how's it going? Good to see you. I've seen Sharon joined as well earlier. Good to see you all. So There was one question in the chat, and so maybe someone can help me with these questions because I unfortunately cannot answer everything. There is a question here that says, how fast is Redshift compared to Cycles? I learned Cycles many, 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 many years ago. So I cannot give you a good answer on this. I can tell you that Redshift is really fast, and I also spend a lot of my time teaching and training studios in production about optimization. So not only that it's fast, but how we can make it even faster and how we can make the quality really great. That's something I teach all of the time. So I cannot answer this question. Maybe someone in the chat can. That would be really cool. Talking about a comparison between Redshift and Cycles. But what I can do is, if you are keen with Redshift, I teach it quite a lot. So I can help you out. So if you have any questions on the Redshift side of things and the speed of Redshift, I can definitely help you out with that. Cool. Let's have a little look. Okay, cool. So we have, can the Redshift Clouds object be hidden from the camera primary rays, but still be visible in reflections? The last time I tested, the Redshift render tag didn't seem to have any effect. Shall we see? Because I don't know the answer, but we can figure it out and we can see. So can it be hidden from the camera primary rays, but still be visible in reflections? Let's see if there's a way that we could do this. I wonder if the Redshift tag would work. I don't know if it would work. So no. That's the answer to that. Do you know what? Hang on. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, I got really excited then. I was kind of hoping that was going to work. What other method could we try? Let's see if we can do it within. Could we do it within? I don't think so. I was trying to think if there's a way of having the details and to... Let's... I'm just testing. I'm playing around now. No, that definitely didn't do what I hoped it would do. It doesn't look like it. Again, I can play around and find out. These are the two methods that I've just tried, is the way that I would have hoped it worked. And it was more likely to work with the volumetric clouds option, because this then generates actual volumes, as opposed to it being a bit of a procedural texture setup, which is what it is normally, which is why it's really fast to render. So I was kind of hoping that with the volumetric clouds, it was more likely to work, because it's then a real volume. But unfortunately, it has not done what I thought it would. If anyone else has any ideas, of course, let me know. And Adam, I will find out for you, and I will let you know. Drop me a message on Instagram or drop me an email. I'm e_wade@maxon.net. Anyone can do that. So anyone can drop me a message. So yeah, ping me that question and I will find out for you. Cool. So at the risk of heavily overrunning, which is what we try not to do, I want to really quickly show you one or two final things inside of here. The scratcher shader, and then some really quick Redshift Live updates. And I know we had an ArcViz question, so I was asking about like ArcViz in Redshift. So Redshift Live could be a helpful thing for you. So really quickly, I was gonna... Why is this doing this to me? It doesn't like a brand new scene. That's funny. If you've just joined, welcome to the second crash of the live stream. At least we made it a good 50 minutes between each of them. let's just go back into here. Let's see. I do have a scene that we can do. It's being temperamental today. This is the joys of testing out different Redshift versions, right? This is what happens. Okay, new material, pop that on there. Here we go. So this is another new feature that came in 2 weeks ago, and it is a procedural scratches shader. So I'm going to put that in there, and I'm just going to show you how this works, because you can see here, right, we've got quite a few outputs. Like normally when we release like a node, it has, you know, out color or something like that. This time we actually have given you a lot of different things that you might need. So the first thing that we have is the scratch color. So I'm just going to plug these in just to show you what this is doing. So this actually creates a black and then a multicolored map for our scratches. And you might think, why would this come in handy? Well, what we're able to do is we can actually take this color and we can change it and we can adjust it and we can start to create some interesting patterns. So the best thing about when we release this kind of stuff is when people take it, artists take it and studios take it and they turn it into their own really cool thing. So scratches doesn't just have to be scratches. Some people have been using it for brush metals. Some people have been using it for really cool patterns. So what we can do is we could change these colors by going into taking a ramp. Let me actually just put that straight onto there just to make my life easier. So we can change the colors here, and it's going to change the base color of our vase or vase, however you want to say it. I can set this to being a metal, and then what I can do is I can then play around with these different colors. So let's just keep my life simple. And I can change these colors, and it's going to just represent these different scratches. I'm going to leave it like this just so we can really visually see what is going on. So we have our scratch canvas size. What this is going to be is when we have the scratch length to 100, this is the physical size of our scratches. So if I come down to a value of 1, we can see, let me just maybe turn off depth of field. We don't really need that going on, do we? So we can see we have our smaller scratches versus our larger scratches, and that's because we have that length set to 100. We have the density, so we can increase or decrease this. So I'm leaving the colors on just so you can really see visually what this is doing. We can mask between our scratches. So from 0 to 1, 0 is basically going to mask out every single scratch up to a value of then masking out none of them. What's cool about this is, again, what we could do is we could take a ramp, vertical, new range, 0.1, and sort of maybe pull this down, pull this down, pull this down. And we can use this. So all of these can also become inputs, right? So if you command or control click, these can also become inputs. So then we can mask using something like a ramp between these as well. So we can now mask between these scratches based on a ramp, based on a noise, all of this kind of stuff. Again, that seed value, just like everything else inside of C4D, allows us to randomize that. When it comes down to the bump strength, what we're going to do now is let's change that. Let's actually make it look like some scratches, right? So we have a metal material, and what we would do is we would perhaps plug in our roughness. So it's going to adjust the roughness there. We can plug in our anisotropy. So our anisotropy in here should be anisotropy. This is our reflections, right? And then we have our bump. And the coolest thing about this is we don't need a bump node, which is probably my favorite thing about this, right? We can just plug that straight into the bump here. And now we have our scratches going on there. So coming back down, we now have the ability to control the bump strength. So this is why we don't need the bump node here. So we can come in and we can actually just change this, increase and decrease strength. We can go negative as well. So then now the detail is going to come out as opposed to going in like it normally would. Let's pull that back in there. Loads of different cool settings for the look of the scratches, things like length, width. Curve is a fun one. So if I go to like curve, we can see we have sort of these more spiral values here. One thing I'm going to tell you, steps normally allows you to control the orientation or the kind of direction of scratches. So for example, if you wanted them all to be vertical, there is a bug. There is a bug on Mac on 0.8. So the version that we're all on right now, 0.8. I can't change the steps. So in the next release, this is going to be fixed, which is hopefully soon. So yeah, I would love to show you this. I'd love to show you how he creates some brushed metals, which is really cool, but I sadly cannot. And then all of these values here, what these change, things like the scratch specular and the base specular are going to be controlling the roughness values inside of there, right? So a few other things that we could do with this, right? Like we said, we've got a whole range of different outputs that we might want to be playing around with. So let's turn off the anisotropy for now. You know, actually, no, let's just leave the anisotropy on. And then we'll make these bigger just so we can see them. So we can see we've got these really large scale scratches, and we can go down and we can have like really small scratches. What we can do is if I wanted this to be represented by a different color, so let's say as a scratch has taken place underneath it, it has a different color or a different material, we can do that by just taking a material layer or material blender and then just duplicating this material. And so let's say underneath we have this sort of white diffuse material. We can plug this in just like this. Okay, so we have the scratches on here, and then we have this material underneath. What we can do is we can take the mask, again, command or control that input, and then we can take that mask, and what it's going to do is it creates a black and white mask for us, so we can then have the top material, that's the one with the scratches, that representing this, and the bottom material that is showing this color underneath. So let's just pull that down so we can see this really easily. If I just like set that to red, just so we can see that nice and clearly through the stream, we're able to then also take that mask to change those colors. So all of these different inputs can be extremely helpful, extremely useful. And hopefully I can create a quick tip soon when the steps is resolved to show you how you can create some like brushed metals effects in there. Okay, so finally, the one final thing I do want to talk about, and we will get to some questions because I've seen there are a couple in there, is Redshift Live. So Redshift Live at the moment has a couple of limitations, right? Which is why I'm deleting certain things. So I've just deleted the portal lights because it is not able to calculate those, and I'm just going to delete the gobos. So this is a bit of an interior scene that I have going on. I'm just going to kick off my render view. At the moment, I'm using the normal production renderer inside of Redshift. And this is how this looks. This is an interior scene that I made many years ago. I need to create an updated version, perhaps a nicer looking version to show Redshift Live a little bit more, but this can still give you a visual of Redshift Live. So a bit of a explanation as to what Redshift Live is. If we go into my render settings, so let me just switch this off for now. In my render settings, Inside Redshift, we have two different modes. We have production, we have live. It used to be RT. RT was developed and it never really kind of hit off. I'm also on a Mac, so I was never really able to use it anyway, because it wasn't developed for Mac. But the idea is it's our fastest interactive render engine within Redshift. It was created originally for Redshift for AEC, so for Vectorworks, for ArcViz. So those ArcViz people in the chat who've been asking questions, we took it from that and we put it inside of Redshift, inside of the DCC Cinema 4D. And it's near real-time updates, right? So the look that you get will not be the same as production. It's close, and we are still working on improving it. But the idea here is it's for really good ArcViz, it's for good look dev, scene layout, stuff like that. So I'm going to hit this over to live, and I'm just going to do this, and it's just going to compile the shaders, and it's going to process. Cool. So we can see the quality is obviously slightly less, but the interesting thing here is when we come out of the camera and we start moving around our scene. So for those of you who use, let me go back in here, those of you who use things like Vectorworks and stuff like that, this is very similar to the Redshift previewer within Vectorworks. So as we move around, you can see it's going to do that quick little update, right? So as we move, we get the slightly undersampled version, but then as soon as we stop, it's going to do that really quick compiling, and then it's going to begin doing a progressive render. So this is me moving around whilst live streaming on a M3 Mac for you. Even better, some of the updates. Like I said, it's still a little bit limited. There are some things that aren't visible yet, refraction being a big one, something that is really being worked on now, and hopefully should be coming soon. But if I just bring in a camera, what we do have is if I just choose a focus distance and turn on my bokeh, we now have depth of field, which is one of the updates that came in 2 weeks ago. So we now have depth of field within here, within this camera. And what we also have is post effects. So what I'll do, just for speed, I'm going to throw in a light, and I'm just going to make it 5 by 5 by 5, and I'm going to place it here. What did I do? 5 by 5 by 5. Okay, let's lift it up a little bit and let's make it visible. So we have this little ball of light here. And this is just so I can really easily show you the post effects. Within my render settings, we have a few limited settings available inside of here. But if we right click and we go post effects and then we enable bloom, these are all the different post effects that we have. We can apply LUTs, lookup tables, we can apply color controls. Bloom is kind of like a glow. We have flares, we have streaks, and we can create backgrounds in our render as well. Of course, this is an entire scene, so we don't need that background. But we can see we're able to create this effect. We can tint this a certain color if we want to. We can create an increased softness. We can reduce the intensity if it's too intense, or bring up the intensity. So if you want to have some bloom and some glow on your lights as well, you can do. What we also added was within the basic tab, we have some new combined depth global values, so we can increase and decrease the amount of indirect light bouncing, so our GI, and of course our reflection. And soon, once we have refractions available in Redshift Live as well, we'll be able to have those in there, as well as things like denoising. So it is a extremely fast interactive preview with the idea around things like ArcViz, things like look development, things like scene development, because like you can see, it's extremely fast to be working within here. So this question from Matt, one of the challenges is that we need to import the model into Cinema 4D. Can we render this in Rhino? I think I'm trying to understand the question. You need to import the model in Cinema 4D, as in your Vectorworks model or your ArcViz model. You need to import that in Cinema 4D. If that is the question, then yes, there is a direct export import from Vectorworks into Cinema 4D. As regards to Rhino, I do not know about Rhino. Apologies. Oh, so you work in CAD software called Rhino. Okay. I'm not sure if we have released for Rhino. I know we have for Vectorworks. I know we have for Revit. It's again something I can feedback to the team. So it could then be a possibility, just like it is for Vectorworks, where we can go into Redshift, we can go into Redshift Live, and then we can also import that into Cinema 4D. That is a current exchange that we have, but I can feedback for Rhino as well if it's something that is interesting. Cool. So let me have a quick look through. There's any questions that are related to what we have been talking about. There's another question, Matt. I've seen your question as well about, are there presets we can select the location of our buildings? So what you can do in things like the sun and sky, we have time and location. So what we can do is we can actually generate our sun and sky as well as a night sky atmosphere scene. And you can control your time and location there. So you will get the representation of the atmosphere and of the day or night time of the time and location. So that is a possibility. Just having a little look through. So we did have, someone did respond to the Cycles versus Redshift. Same scene. Redshift is faster, around 1.5 to 2 times faster. Sometimes the same duration. Cycles can still be grainy, but Redshift can be very clean. So there we go. Thank you for that answer. That's there. I'll just put that up just so people can read that. Cool. That's really cool. That's what I love about being live, is that people can help answer each other's questions. Because like I said, I definitely cannot answer everything, unfortunately. I also don't like to give, on things that I don't understand, I don't like to give a incorrect opinion. I'd rather just say that I don't know, or that I can find out for you. So I can always definitely try and find out. So there's been a couple of questions about Redshift Toon and Toon materials. So the idea is that isn't going to be talked about today, because I want to keep this to the new features, right? And I don't want to overrun too much. But because there are a couple of questions, what I'll do, I will do either another live stream soon, or I'll do some content soon that talks a little bit more about Redshift and toon shading and the kind of questions that you had inside of here. Also, this is a little QR code that I put up earlier. If you do have questions, maybe they're not on the stuff that we've talked about, maybe it's on completely different products that we do, you can actually ask your questions here. You can share project files, and then we can get back to you. I'm also on Instagram. I'm at @itwaselly, and I do a lot of content on there, or my email is e_wade@maxon.net. So if you ever have some questions or you want to share some files, definitely feel free to message on any of those kind of platforms, and we'll do our best. As a whole team of us here, we'll do our best to help with that. I'm just having a final little flick through. So, Matt, I just answered that question for you because I saw it above. So hopefully that was a good answer for you, where within the sun and sky rig itself, you can control things like time and location, and it's going to control the look of your day and your nighttime scene in a realistic manner. That is probably the closest and quickest way of being able to have any kind of presets of location. But other than that, we don't have any sort of like actual presets within the asset library with regards to kind of locations. Cool. So I definitely didn't get finished in 45 minutes. That was the famous last words, and then we overran. But that was also thanks to loads of really good questions. If, like I said, if you have more questions, if you want to see more stuff like this, like I know it's been a while since I've done a bit of a stream. Thank you to everyone who's been here live. Thank you to those in the chat having those conversations. That's this whole point of us going live, is so we can help answer your questions, we can show you some new stuff, but also there's a community of you in there that can also interact and talk to each other and find some help for the things that you might need. I've enjoyed being live with you all again. It has been fun. It has been a while since I've been on here. At the risk of going too far over, I will say goodbye to you all now, and hopefully I will see you on a stream soon. This will be on YouTube as a quick reminder, so don't worry if you have missed it. If you're watching the recording, hi, thank you. Let us know your questions. QR code is earlier in the chat, as is my email, as is my Instagram. We're here to help you as much as we can. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much to everyone for being on, and I will catch you on a stream soon. Bye, everyone.